Hello, mentors. Welcome to our podcast series, Mentorships in Education, brought to you by Just Education at justeducationfirst.com. I am your host, Judi Epstein. I am very excited about the wide range of experts who have volunteered to give up their time and expertise. They will share their innovative ideas, their exciting perspectives, their rich resources, and their research with us. Please continue to delve into these topics on their websites and with your legal counsel, healthcare provider, and education professional. Our guests will have information that will be relevant to mentors supporting struggling students, parents, teachers, administrators, legal support, and health professionals. We will address all levels of education with issues that affect academic performance. Our goal is to open discussions and introduce a variety of approaches to those searching for information in a free venue. So mentors, let me introduce our guests for today. Hello, mentors. Welcome to our 38th episode of Mentorships in Education. I'm sure you're all aware that it is Black History Month. Audre Lorde, a famous Black activist, a writer, a feminist, a mother, and so much more, was quoted as saying, "There is no such thing as a single issue struggle." She championed many causes, and her quote related to those causes, but I'm going to try and relate it to the challenges we're facing today. Kids, parents, teachers, and all the support people who are working with our children are trying to teach in Covidland, and it has become a significant challenge. But that challenge has many, many layers. We're affected by losses in social contacts, emotional supports, in our relationships, and so many other ways. And our children are affected by this also. And because we're affected, they can feel sometimes our distress and react to that. Today we have Julie Lythcott-Haims with us. We will explore the African American experience, but also the tendencies of parents or adults in general to try and manage, as I say, the vicissitudes of life for our children, rather than taking the opportunity to use the event as a teaching moment for growth. Julie, welcome. Thank you for being with me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Before we get into our discussion, I do want to tell our listeners a little bit about you. Julie believes very much in humans and is deeply interested in what gets in our way sometimes in our humanity. She's the New York Times best-selling author of the Anti-Helicopter Parenting Manifesto, How to Raise an Adult. Her TED Talk on the subject has more than 5 million views. And in 2020, she became a regular contributor with CBS This Morning on parenting. Her second book is the critically acclaimed and award-winning prose poetry memoir, Real American, which illustrates her experience as a Black and biracial person in white spaces. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. Her third book, Your Turn, How to Be an Adult, will be out in April. And I'll probably read that too, because I'm not quite sure I've reached the point yet where I consider myself an adult. Julie is a former corporate lawyer and a Stanford Dean, and she holds a BA from Stanford, a JD from Harvard, and an MFA in writing from California College of the Arts. And there's so much more to learn about Julie. I don't want to take our time talking about that, but there will be a link on the website, and I hope that you will explore a little bit more about Julie. But I'd like to get into our talk right now, our discussion. So thank you. I have so much to go over with you. I was going over my notes from my talk and all the little things I wrote down on the side. And if I start delving into things that you feel aren't as important as other things, please feel free to segue me into those other areas. We talked a little bit about your life as a African American biracial child growing up in this country. And maybe you can kind of introduce our listeners to a little bit about you and your experiences growing up and where you decided to, or how you decided to write this memoir of yours called Real American.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So as I sit here with you, Judi, and with you listeners, I'm a 53-year-old woman. I am Black and racial. I have very light skin. My mother is white. My father was Black. My father's been dead for many years, which is why I put him in the past tense. They fell in love with one another in the 1960s when it was really quite transgressive for people to be in an interracial relationship. So I come from people who broke the rules. My existence was never really contemplated by, in any positive sense, by American society and policymakers and lawmakers. I learned young, growing up in New York and Wisconsin and Northern Virginia, that something was wrong with my Black daddy and something was wrong with me too. I learned that from the looks in the eyes of strangers as my daddy and I walked down the street. So as happens with kids with brown skin in America, depending on where you grow up, I got the message that something was wrong with us. And I plunged from that innocent child to being somebody who knew that she was considered the other, considered less than, considered problematic, and worse. And I learned that lesson. I began to learn it at age 4. And ultimately, throughout childhood, and dealt with a number of microaggressions and some what I call blunt force racism, like the N-word being written on my locker when I was in high school on my 17th birthday.
Oh my gosh.
And that just made me, in the aggregate, made me loathe myself. I just desperately did not want to be Black and just wanted to be what white people valued, just wanted to be like them. And that was really a messed up psychological state. Took me a couple decades to get out of that and do the work, the interior work to work all of that through. And I became this self-loving person, located a self I could love, is how I put it.
I like you too. I think we've had some good talks.
And I decided the journey might be of use to others, which is why I wrote Real American. Okay. And the title comes from Sojourner Truth, who said at the Falls Women's Conference, women's suffrage movement era, "Ain't I a woman?" when they were working out how to strategize for a woman's right to vote. It was an effort largely led by white women, not entirely, but the white women who were leading that effort were not super interested in Black women also getting the franchise. Yeah. And Sojourner Truth is reported to have said, "Ain't I a woman?" And so my book is a response to that, or in paying homage to her. Ain't I a real American? The natives are the real Americans. And, the African Americans got here in 1619, and I can trace my lineage here back to a slave who lived in Charleston, South Carolina in the late 1700s, the mid 1700s. And yet when we talk about American history, because our ancestors were slaves, often it's been until recently hard to find those records and to really claim that ownership to this place and to our lineage. And so we've been made to feel like we're not real Americans. Sarah Palin's voice comes to mind. Real Americans want this. Real Americans want that. Donald Trump's rhetoric comes to mind. And those of us who have brown skin are repeatedly reminded that there are plenty of our fellow citizens among us who don't really regard us as real Americans, who think America is a white country, and it never has been, and it's never going to be. And so that's why I wrote this book. It's a political book. It's a memoir. It's deeply vulnerable. It's mostly stories from the experiences I've had. But when I say it's political, I mean it responds to our American moment. The book was written in 2016, published in 2017, and feels, in some ways I seem to have had my finger on the pulse of what would come.
With your experiences growing up, I want to kind of get into some of the other things that you do now. So I'm wondering how your parents, mother or father, helped you grow into the strong, independent woman you are. So this had to have come somewhere along the line from your mother or your father validating your experiences and helping you work through them, I would imagine.
Your question certainly begs the question, is it nature or nurture? Regardless, my parents were involved in both the nature and the nurture side of me. Right. I come from strong people. I've already said that these were people who transgressed the rules. So these were people who didn't sit in the box society wanted to put them in. I come from them for sure, genetically and behaviorally. I looked up to and admired both of them. My father was a physician, very prominent in public health. He was Assistant Surgeon General under President Jimmy Carter. So I grew up with a daddy who was important in his field. I knew it. He himself had survived or, endured the Jim Crow South. My father would have been 102, 103 this April if he had not died at 77. So he's really from a different era, born in 1918, had made it up and out, to be a doctor, educated at a medical school in 1943 as a Black man was quite unusual. His father, my Black grandfather, was a doctor, which is quite unusual. So I come from these people who have basically, put a firm resolve on their face and in their heart and kept going. And so I think that has strengthened me. My mother also came from struggles. She came from people in the north of England who were made fun of by wealthier and better educated British people, and first generation college student in her family. And, just constantly persevered against some really difficult odds in her upbringing. So I do think that I had role models of how you keep going.
Do you think it was the role model aspect that helped you get through this, or was it or maybe a combination? But I mean, did you come home and complain at all? You speak about how important it is for parents to listen to what their kids are saying and validate their feelings and not diminish their comments. How did your parents relate to you, or did you share with them your concerns about not wanting to be Black and not wanting to be biracial, wanting to be white? How did they respond to that?
I never told them.
You never? Okay.
I never mentioned it. I have come to this place of self-awareness and self-love as a grown-up. And my father died when I was 27, and it wasn't yet apparent to me at that age that I should be talking with him about his choices around my upbringing. For example, my parents chose to raise me in predominantly white environments, and any psychologist who attends to the healthy psychological development of a child of color would say children of color need peers who look like them. They need teachers who look like them, mentors who look like them. And my parents didn't know that or didn't value it enough. And if I could go back and change anything about my childhood, I would beg my parents not to place me in an all-white high school for my adolescence.
That's interesting. That's interesting.
A hard experience, but they had chosen that for me. And so I didn't have the wherewithal to interrogate it at the moment. How was these people, my parents clearly thought this would be fine. So the degree of argument I would have had to surmount to surmount their presumption that I would be fine was enormous. And I didn't want to draw attention to my struggles. I wasn't sure if my struggles were valid. Often the narrative is, it didn't happen, get over it, don't be so sensitive.
Right, that's really weird.
The benefit of the doubt. So I had all of messages implicit in my mind, coming from society writ large, coming from the news, coming from the media, coming from the voices of my friends and teachers, that whatever feelings I was having were not valid or important. So I didn't tell anybody. I had the N-word written on my locker senior year of high school, and I didn't breathe a word of it to anybody until I was 44.
Interesting.
But I spent those decades trying to never be called the N-word again.
Right. And I'm Jewish, and I did grow up with some discrimination when I was growing up. And the difference is that I could hide who
Right.
I was. You couldn't hide who you were. So, having some derogatory terms passed to
Yep.
me in notes with people who knew was certainly uncomfortable, but there were people that I didn't share that side of my life with either, because I knew that it wouldn't be accepted.
Oh,
I know,
let me say though here, because
yeah,
this is important. So thank you for
yeah,
sharing that.
yeah,
There's a lot of inherent similarity between the experience of the Jewish diaspora and the African diaspora writ
mhm,
large. And I think when we find our similarities and our solidarity with one another, we're stronger as people. So I appreciate that you shared that. I also want to let you know my mother-in-law is an Orthodox Jew, so I'm not Jewish. Her son, my partner, is an atheist, so he doesn't really connect religiously. But I have a number of family members who are Jewish, religious or not, and
mhm,
so my heart is very, very warm and tender for Jewish people. And what you just described of being hidden in your identity, so people
mhm,
didn't necessarily know by looking at you.
mhm.
Um, as being a bit of a benefit, it was the implication. Like
Yes,
my brown skin is something I can't
right.
take off. But the flip side is when an identity is hidden,
Mhm.
we often suffer as people talk about
Oh,
our people, our
absolutely.
kind. They don't realize
That's
they're talking
oh,
about us.
sure.
So then this pain of of passing, as we call it
Yes,
in the Black community, it's like you may have a more rarefied existence because no one knows you're Jewish, but you suffer listening to them talk about you and not feeling, depending on the degree of safety
yes,
and strength you have in that
yep,
place.
yep.
Do I speak up? Do I take the risk? Will I be supported? Will I be safe? Do
Oh,
I just
yes.
swallow it? Swallowing it harms us.
It does. And as you got to the point where you were comfortable in your own skin, I also, and I got into high school, became more comfortable in speaking out. And so, yes, we do. But I just wanted to let you know that, from my perspective, that it was easier for me than I thought perhaps it was for you. I know you're a parent as well. And so I want to combine your parenting style with some of the things that you saw as a dean of freshmen at Stanford, and what you saw the parents do there, perhaps what you did with your own children that you learned maybe not to do as you became more experienced in working with other people's children. So if you can kind of talk about that, and I'm going to ask you also to build into this, and I'm going to be quiet for a little while, to build into this the opportunities that parents may have. You can talk about this, down the road a little bit, but I also want to address the opportunities that parents have now when their children are home and they're struggling by trying to micromanage everything they're doing when the kids are doing, learning, and when they do their homework and when they have dinner. So how does this translate from your parenting style to what you saw as a dean to what parents can do today with their children and teachers can do with their students, um, who are struggling to manage everything they have to do, their jobs, their schoolwork, their homework, and so forth. Um, and who's responsible? I mean, I tell my parents it's not your job to become the resident nag. That's what I say. And so I'm kind of wondering from your perspective how you would address
Yeah, I love that question. I'm just writing down this quote, not your
that.
job to become the resident nag. Uh, so you asked about my parenting style and what I observed as dean, and I'm going to flip those things in order
Mm-hmm.
because I was first observing things as a dean that concerned me. Students on my campus at Stanford who had parents who were overly managing their lives, whether it was always needing to know where they were and what they were up to, seem to not have good boundaries around privacy and choices, wanting to be very involved in the academic side, wanting to discuss grades with a professor, wanting to review work before it was turned in, or just holding their hand too much, filling out their forms, registering them for class, getting involved in things that where you just, as the older person, wanted to say, wait a minute, why do you think your 20-year-old is so incapable? And we've mentioned that I was at Stanford. This wasn't a Stanford problem. I was seeing a change in childhood on my campus. It was evident on every campus. Childhood was changing. Parents were intimately involved in their kids' day-to-day management of life. And at first it was sort of funny because I thought these kids, quote unquote, could be in the army, but instead they're at a 4-year college where there are a lot of resources and supports. Why are the parents so micromanaging? So I was sort of complaining about this, or, giving speeches to parents saying, please back off. It's good. It's everything, and then I had the very humbling discovery that I was on track to be one of those parents because I was over parenting, micromanaging every detail of my children's lives. And I probably came to that realization when my kids were 8 and 10, because I was working with other people's 18, 20.
That's interesting that you came to your aha moment with other people's children and not in your own home.
Well, the aha moment, it was definitely my own home where I had, oh my gosh, it's me. I was cutting my 10-year-old son's meat. And I realized there's a clear line between this behavior of mine and the helplessness I'm seeing some, and it was by no means all, or even most, but many of my students. I really saw it was like a bright light came on, and I saw the connection that you can't possibly let your 18-year-old go if you haven't prepared them by developing their skills along the way. They are helpless maybe, or very dependent on you. So I had that realization. The book that I wrote, How to Raise an Adult, is very much incorporating both of those perspectives. A dean working with other people's kids, me raising my own. The pandemic, Judi, really is a great opportunity for us to stop micromanaging for the very reasons you mentioned. Parents are, in many instances, working a full-time job from home, raising children who are constantly at home, cleaning their own home more than ever, because if they've had any help with that, they're not bringing that help in. They're not paying people under the current circumstances to come in. There's this sort of too much happening all at once. And so if we have micromanaging tendencies, the pandemic is sort of a way of saying, you can't possibly be and I haven't even mentioned like being a partner, your spouse, if you have one, or a significant other, or being your own person and looking after your own needs. All I've mentioned is work, kids, and house. And so I encourage us to see the silver lining of this pandemic as, okay, maybe this can allow me to reset my micromanaging tendencies if I have them, to accept what I am not in charge of, which is my kids' homework. How can I be in charge of my kids' homework if I'm also doing a full-time job, on my device, and it's not giving up and it's not abandoning your kids at an age and stage appropriate, in an age and stage appropriate way. We're supposed to be pulling back and expecting them to do more. A kindergartner probably needs you to turn on the device and get the link, pulled up. But a third grader doesn't, and a seventh grader surely doesn't. And, a kindergartner may need you to say, okay, what's today's homework? And have you taken care of it? And maybe a third grader needs that too. But at some point, the fifth grader should just get a look from you like, okay, don't forget your homework, and just values around, we do our work in this family, we get our work done and then we play, but not, did you get it done? I need to know that you got it done. Why didn't you get it done? Ultimately, that homework is an exchange between a teacher and a child. And when we parents insert ourselves either by constantly reminding and nagging, by putting our own hands in the homework, and let's not fail to address that. Parents in many communities before the pandemic were doing some of their kids' homework to try to ensure it gets done correctly, gets the right grade, gets them to the right class, gets them to the right school and the right college. And that's just harming kids' mental health. If parents doing their homework, it's like, the clearest way of saying you're not capable of succeeding in your life. I need to step up and live your life for you. So the pandemic is an opportunity to pull back on some harmful behaviors that have really impeded kids' skill development and damaged their mental health. And so I would say to parents listening, look for the opportunity to give your kid more responsibility because of the pandemic, to say, okay, we're all busy. We're all at work and school. We've got to make dinner. I'm going to need your help. And nod your head in the direction of the kitchen and say, the minute you're done with that, please come help me. We're going to start making dinner, and start teaching your kids to chop things and saute things and set the table and get things out of their fridge and put them away. And the younger you get kids involved in this stuff, the more skilled they are, the more competent they are, the more confident they are, the more cooperative they are. They get the mental health boost of knowing I'm a valued member of this team. I belong. There's a beautiful book, actually, that I want to recommend to you and your listeners called Hunt, Gather, Parent by Micheline Duclef, who is an NPR reporter. And it's a wonderful sort of anthropological approach to which cultures are best at raising children who are highly skilled, highly confident, kind, helpful. It's not ours. She went around the world and lived with people in 3 different places with her own child on her back, wow. 3-year-old, and went and got feedback from those communities about what she needed to do differently to really undo a lot of the damage of the sort of modern American parenting style. So it's a great book, and it gets back.
You're kind of talking about the feeling of self-confidence, this self-efficacy that teachers talk about all the time, and having children learn to have confidence in themselves and not being afraid to make a mistake. And, it's not about perfection. It's about learning from failure. And that's kind of a different paradigm that we need to change our direction about things being perfect, and asking, our kids what they got on their test today, if we knew they took a test. And I feel we need to give them equal support for the effort that they put in preparing for it, maybe in getting a C. If that's what we know, they were concerned about it, they were worried about it, and they end up getting the C. That's very important. I like your comment about a silver lining for COVID. And I think that I wrote that down. And I'm going to quote you when we spoke, and you said that kids were being raised like veal.
Yeah.
And I love that quote, because I think that speaks so well to all of the examples you just gave. Maybe you'll take a minute and kind of elaborate on that a little bit, because I think that it pertains to teachers, it pertains to parents, it pertains to all of the support staff that work with students. Sometimes we do treat them like veal and not give them, as you say, the respect to be able to try something on their own and fail, or succeed on their own.
Absolutely. So I need to give credit where credit is due. The veal quote that I shared with you is a quote in my book, How to Raise an Adult. And it's me quoting a guy named Joe Maruschek, who is a superintendent at the Mendon-Upton School District in Massachusetts. And he said he worried that too many young adults seemed like veal, meaning they had been raised in controlled environments and led metaphorically to slaughter. If you think about a little veal calf, is just micromanaged, fed, curated, right, to become what? Delicious food for humans. None of us, and so it's a tough metaphor, but the point is, like, that calf is never going to be this independent thing that gets to go live its life. And Joe's point is, the real world will slaughter our kids if they don't emerge from our homes capable of looking after themselves, capable of bouncing back. Look, I have this thing I call the arc of becoming a healthy, whole human. The ARC is an acronym, ARC, agency, resilience, character. Agency is I can do things, not I'm amazing, I'm going to be president or whatever. It's I can do the task in front of me. resilience is I can cope when things go badly. Implicit in that is things will go badly. We do our kids no favors when we handle everything for them. We're robbing them of both agency, this I can do this, and resilience. I can cope when it goes badly. The third thing, the CARC, character. There's more than me in this world. The awareness that my behavior and intentions and attitude impacts others. And it's not just all about me. I have to move through the world in a way that is respectful of other people. And so the arc of becoming a healthy, happy human rests on these three foundational things: agency, resilience, and character. So look, we parents, we love our kids. We want what's best for them. We don't want to see them struggle. We don't want to see them sad. We don't want to see them get a 0 in your class if you're a teacher. But lately, the last couple decades, we've decided, so therefore, I will ensure you're never sad. I will ensure nothing ever goes wrong. And I will make sure that that homework, if you left it behind, gets delivered so you never get the 0. And it feels loving. And we intend it lovingly. And we achieve that short-term soothing of the situation. But research is increasingly showing that what we're doing is fomenting fear into anxiety. When we say your fear of the dark is so valid, I'm going to make sure you're never in the dark. It feels loving, but instead that becomes a full-blown anxiety for that kid about I can never be in the dark. And what's happening psychologically, this is according to the work of Ellie Leibovitz at Yale, which was written up in a beautiful article in The Atlantic last year. We're effectively saying that fear is so valid and bad things would so definitely happen. We're going to curate your whole environment so you never have to experience those things. And instead, what we're supposed to do is say, yeah, I understand you're afraid. Of course, that makes sense. Validate, empathize, and then express confidence that one day it won't be this hard for you. And I love you no matter what. And I guess what I was trying to say was we think it's loving to make sure that bad thing never happens. Turns out it weakens them. We need them to have not the terrible bad things like, life threatening, but a whole lot of stuff, happens in childhood that we're now preventing from happening because we're so worried. We have to let these things happen. There's a book called Gist that refers to these things as the mistakes and curveballs life will throw your way. Kids have to experience those things so they can learn from them and come back stronger.
I just got that book. I'm going to be reading it. So I will let you know how I like it. I want to remember the point I was going to make. You talk about letting kids make mistakes. And of course we use terms like tiger mom and helicopter mom. And we're very busy using our time to orchestrate all of these things. One of the things you say in your book, How to Raise an Adult, and I've copied some of the pages from there because you give some examples of dialogue that we can have with our children. And I'm thinking to myself, instead of spending all this time orchestrating what needs to be done and sit here and do this and do that and let me do this, if our time is limited, how about trying to have some of these conversations that you're recommending that parents have with their children? And you've started with examples of having a talk with your preschooler who, maybe they're having a bad day. And rather than trying to help them do what they need to do, it might be supportive and teach them a little bit to recognize their thinking and be aware of their thoughts. If we say to them, honey, what's bothering you? And, what are you thinking? And do you think you might be having a problem with that? What is the problem here? Rather than coming in and doing everything for them. So your example was more about a child saying they see a butterfly, and you ask a question like, yes, that's a butterfly. Good job. What color is it? And you try and elicit information from them and get a dialogue going. This is time we could spend with our children in helping them cope with what they are going through. How do they feel about not seeing their friends, rather than saying something to the effect of, I know I don't get to see my friends either. Just, suck it up. We need to do this work. And this is how we're going to do it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I love the examples you give, but I want some more specific ways that parents can reach out to their children and validate their concerns, because they have the same concerns. And sometimes we feel we can't share those with our kids, because we don't want them to worry about it. But I feel it's important to be able to do that, because our children are feeling them anyway. And I think it's important for them to understand that, we have those same feelings and same concerns and same sense of loss.
Yeah. Thank you for quoting that part of the book. That was in the chapter called Teach Them How to Think.
Exactly.
Which is about tips for teaching your kid to think for themselves, as opposed to just spoon feeding information to them.
Yes.
And so the butterfly example is, the wrong thing to do is, a kid says it's a butterfly, and the parent says, yes, a butterfly. Good job. What color is it? It says orange and black. And you say, that's right. You're so smart. The kid hasn't learned anything from that conversation. They've just gotten overpraised by you for noticing an insect. Whereas the child saying a butterfly, and you say, ooh, what's the butterfly doing? That's inviting them to be curious and to activate their critical thinking. And the child answers, and you keep asking, what do you think? Why do you think that is, etc. It's just a way to get them to do the cognitive work of thinking rather than just receiving information from you. But I think what this question is really touching upon is, how do we build critical thinking and resilience in kids in this difficult pandemic moment? First of all, every kid's got to know that their feelings are valid and matter. And Brene Brown, the researcher Brene Brown, has said, we want to take our kids' pain away, but we can't. And it's impossible to. And the better thing to do is sit with them and let them feel it and validate that they're feeling it. And so in this moment, here's what I've done. My kids are 19 and 21 now. And I actually was just talking with my 19-year-old about this on the phone last night. She was saying, just here we are almost a year into this pandemic, and things are, it's really hard to be in college, and I can't be with my friends the way I want to be. And her dad and I just looked at her and we said, honey, we can't begin to imagine. Mm-hmm. And she was like, that's what I was trying to say back in April. You can't imagine. And I think back in April, we were saying, yep, this is hard for us too. We get it. We can't see our friends. That is never a helpful response to anybody. Whenever somebody expresses a concern, and our instinct is to say, yes, I agree with you, I share it, we're not listening to them. We've made it now about us. So the loving thing, and the thing that helps them process their emotions and learn to deal with them, is to just active listen and say, sounds like this is really hard for you. Tell me more. If you want to tell me more, I'm here. What you're going through is valid. I can't understand it, but I really would like to learn more and be of whatever help I can. Mm-hmm. You keep the sort of agency with them, and you show them by sitting there and being present that you're not running away from their feelings. You're not trying to fix their situation. You're not judging them. You're just being present. That's one of the most loving things we can do, is simply be present with one another and let people have the feelings they are. When people feel they're heard, when they express a pain or a need or a fear, and they feel they're heard and validated, they don't get weaker, they get stronger. And so that's what we got to be doing in this pandemic. In terms of the parent response, I do believe, yes, certainly the older our kids get, the more we can be quite transparent with them about how we're feeling, but we should never lose sight of the fact that we are still the parent, and we need to be a realist, but also an optimist. Times are hard right now. Things are uncertain. I don't know when I'll be going back to the workplace. I don't know when you'll be going back to school. I don't know when you can see your friends again. All of this is really hard. I understand. You've said it's hard for you. All of that empathy, and then say, you know what? I'm having a hard time too.
Exactly. That's what I mean. Yeah.
And yet then convey the optimism.
Right.
We will get through this. Our ancestors endured worse than this, which is so true for many of us. And, things will one day be better. And then you look for the silver lining. What is uniquely true about this time that is good, that we can take advantage of, and figure out what that means in your family? We celebrate Hanukkah and Christmas, and My daughter was newly back from the East Coast in quarantine. She couldn't be in our house for all of Hanukkah. The first day she was back, we had an outdoor dinner. We turned our front patio into the most glorious patio with candles, big candles, and overhead lights. It was like, we can't have you inside because of this pandemic, but we're going to go all out to create a special experience that we're all going to remember. We did this with our tree lighting as well. We'd never made anything of tree lighting. All of a sudden this year, it was like, we're going to have music and we're going to have eggnog. And before you knew it, my son had made a playlist and it included our wedding song. And my husband and I are dancing to our wedding song out in the yard. And I think we were all wondering, like, why haven't we done this every year? Oh, because we didn't have to. Oh, it was just tree lighting, whatever. The pandemic has allowed us to focus in on what really do we need right now and what would really lift our spirits right now. And I hope we don't lose. And I've started having a daily coffee with my 82-year-old mother, Judi. She's like, I don't see any people. I'm not seeing people. I need to go to the grocery store. And we were like, Mom, you can't go to the grocery store. It's a pandemic. And we'll go for you. She's like, that's not the point. I'm not seeing people. And I realized, even though we are in each other's daily life, I was popcorn and visiting. I was showing up for 12 seconds, ask her a question, 3 minutes. And
because you had to make time for it.
And my daughter said, Mom, Gaga needs 45 minutes to an hour. She needs you to sit down. She needs to offer you a beverage. It's not a valuable visit for her if it's not like that. And I learned that on March 31st. And since April 1st, have had a daily weekday coffee for an hour with my mother.
Well, I will tell you, my mother is no longer alive, but my girlfriend's mother just turned 96. And normally, congratulations, she turned 96. She had a pin that she didn't feel she needed. My girlfriend told her that she had a friend that loves dragonflies. It was a dragonfly. The mother gave it to my girlfriend to give to me. And we are now emailing each other, where I sent her pictures with me wearing the pin. She sends me back comments. The 90s, I've never even met her, but we're having a relationship that I probably never would have had if I wasn't sitting at home, looking for experiences that I had never had before. I just want to speak about the other chapter that I perused in your book, How to Raise an Adult. And it's about standing up to other adults, scripts for complicated moments. And one of the areas that really intrigued me was your dialogue about how you're not going to be playing the concierge anymore, and the dialogue that you might have with your child in this regard. If there's another aspect that you'd rather talk about, the chauffeur or the fetch and carry, that's fine. But that one kind of appealed to me because I think parents who are listening, or even teachers who are listening, may need some support in maybe they're having an aha moment and maybe they're going to decide how they're going to address this with their children. And I want to make it clear that I am not talking about teachers or parents who are supporting a child who is struggling in a particular area that needs some guidance, that we already know that this particular area is a challenge. I'm talking about kids who could be doing things for themselves and are not. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the point is that for every child, whether they're 2 or 8 or 12 or 18, there's plenty of stuff they can do and handle for themselves. And then there's a narrow slice of things that we've got to take care of for them. And the slice gets narrower the older they get. So we do a lot of rescuing if we're micromanaging helicopter parents, well-intentioned. We like to just handle and make sure nothing's forgotten. Anything forgotten is brought. If we're privileged enough to have the time and the money and the, wherewithal, we'd sort of drop everything and rescue our child, which feels good to us, makes us feel like good parents. We often boast and brag about it. But all that's doing is teaching the child, my parent will always rescue me, instead of, oops, I forgot, I have to sit out, I got a 0. That's how the child's developing brain learns to do it correctly the next time, or maybe the time after, or maybe not until they've done that and had the consequence 3 times. But we're basically being their executive function for them, and that's not helping anybody. So what I suggest is to incorporate dialogue into your life, in your conversations with your kids, with your friends. I'll just going to quote from the book. Say you're with some friends out for a walk, having coffee or cocktails, or at a book club, the golf course, or the PTA, and your kid texts or calls you with a minor catastrophe, which could be, I left my backpack at school. Or I said we'd bring cupcakes for tomorrow, or, whatever.
That's pretty.
Not life or death. Okay. Let your friends hear you say to your kid, I'm so sorry to hear that, honey. That must be so frustrating. I'm sorry you're in that situation. How are you going to solve that? Right? The kid will be like, what do you mean? How am I going to solve it? Go get me cupcakes, or go get my home, whatever. Right? We want to be saying, we're trying to send the message that's yours. There's no better way to build a sense of responsibility and accountability than to put it right back with them. Let me put it in a business context for a moment. Sometimes you're working with a colleague who might report to you who has failed to deliver on the thing they were supposed to do. And I've certainly been guilty of this, have the propensity to say, fine, I'll just handle it myself. You're frustrated. You're not teaching them anything. And now you have more work. No, what you have to do is take a deep breath and smile and say, okay, thanks so much for this effort. But actually what I was asking for was this. So I need you to go back and do this, that, and the other. Leave the responsibility with them. That's how that person is going to get stronger. And ultimately how you're going to get what you want out of the situation. It's the same with our kids. How do you think you're going to solve that? Or that sounds like a problem an 8-year-old can solve. I've taken algebra. Now it's your turn. These are all comments I've heard from actual parents who already parent this way, or who began to in response to reading my book, and the kids end up more skilled, more capable, more confident. It's all good. It all leads to the right results.
Reading your book was definitely an aha moment for me. And I chuckled through, I didn't read the whole thing, I have to say, but I did read bits and pieces of it. And I chuckled as I recognized myself. I have grandchildren now. My children are all grown up, but in reading it, I'm guilty. I did that. I know I'm guilty. I did that. And I'm hoping that I'll do a better job with my grandchildren. And maybe my children will even allow me to impart some wisdom to them after reading the book. I doubt it, but they might. Are there any final thoughts that you would like to share in regard to how we define success and failure with our children, how we the issue about the backpack, I guess, is a perfect example, because the child can't drive there and get it themselves. So how do we help them solve a situation which could be for them a no-win situation? How do we help them cope with it? And if they're not going to get their backpack, then are there some other ways that they can address the problem?
Maybe that problem isn't solvable, but it's a lesson in learning to remember things and in discovering that the sun still rises tomorrow. That's the best way for that kid to remember again, to remember the backpack next time, is to have forgotten, to not be able to do their homework, to have to tell the teacher, I forgot my backpack, so I didn't do my homework. The teacher's going to be hopefully kind and firm, like, okay, I understand. It's a 0, no big deal, or maybe they give them a free pass this time. I don't know. Depends on the teacher, but that's a thing between the teacher and the kid. That's not the parent. Let me put it this way. Working class and poor parents can't drop everything to go deliver the backpack. So when schools allow policies where parents can rescue by bringing forgotten stuff either to school or home from school, you're privileging wealthy parents. And we need to stop that. That's a social justice angle on this. Mental health angle for the kid. The kid develops the skills and the sense of resilience. Like, all right, this bad thing happened. You can develop critical thinking with the kid. You can say, hey, that sounds like a problem an 8-year-old can solve. And your 8-year-old will sputter. Can't you just go get it for me? And you'll have to maybe lie a little bit and say, I can't, honey, I'm swamped today. How do you think you're going to handle it? You reiterate that you think they can. Do you see the power inherent in that statement? How do you think you're going to handle it? You're telling your kid 3 things or 2 things. It's a problem. It's not my problem. And I think you can handle it. Those are the 3 things. How do you think you're going to handle it? You don't say it in an obnoxious way. You say it lovingly, and you're drawing boundaries, and that kid will learn. Look, if it's the kid's most important day of school, the project they've been working on for weeks is in that backpack, lovingly say, you know what? Of course, let me go get that for you. But, please know that I can't do this every time. All right. If it's your kid's most important examination of the entire year and they've overslept and missed their ride, it's very kind for you to say, you know what, I'll drive you, but don't let that be the pattern every day they oversleep. Otherwise they never learn. All they learn is my parent will always handle it. And that sets them up for no agency in adulthood. So look, success is leading a life that feels good to you, doing work that makes you feel I'm doing stuff that matters to me. I'm good at it and I love it. That's the ideal. You got to be both good at it and love it. And when you are doing work that you're good at and you love, you feel successful, and you have a sense of who you are and with whom you feel seen and heard. And you join up in community, partnership, relationship, family, neighborhood, where you can be your full self, where you don't have to hide some aspect of your identity. To me, that's a successful life. And it has nothing to do with what anyone else thinks. And, my new book, Judi, Your Turn, How to Be an Adult, has that at its heart. It's for anybody 18 and up, really. I thought it was for 18 to 34-year-olds, but I'm having 40 and 50 somethings tell me they see them, 60 somethings even saying they get advice out of it. And at the heart of that book is stop pleasing others. They have no idea who you are. Figure yourself out. Go be that person, period. End of sentence. To me, success is a very internally defined thing. And it takes us years often to figure that out. But when we do, boy, life is good.
It does. It took me a long time. I had parents who kind of put me in one direction, and I had to retire to be able to do some of the things that I wanted to do. I want to thank Julie Lythcott-Haims for joining me during this session of Mentorships and Education. We certainly explored some of the layers to which Audre Lorde referred. And I want to mention to listeners, to my mentors, that you have my admiration for all you do, as well as your constant striving to learn more. I hope you will continue your investigation into Julie and learn more about her book, How to Raise an Adult, which is truly right on for today's challenges. She has a new book coming out, and I hope you will watch for that. Look over our other podcasts, our topics, and our guests. Hope you find something of interest to you. Please be safe and stay connected. Thank you, mentors, for being with us today. If you found this podcast of value, please visit justeducationfirst.com to subscribe to our blog and Mentorship and Education podcast so that you may continue the exploration with us. Our goal is to provide a free treasury of information for our listeners so they can become acquainted with the amazing resources that we have available to us. We want to thank all of our guests for giving their time and sharing their wealth of information with us. Please also visit their websites and explore more of their resources to further your pursuit of the topic. Hope to hear from you at justeducationfirst.com. Have a good week, and thank you.